Hi, everybody. Welcome back. So this week we're going to be diving into cell division and mitosis. So last week we were really covering how the unit of DNA, what it's made out of, and how it replicates. And so now that we have an understanding of the replication of DNA, we're going to be looking at the primary reason why DNA is replicated in the first place, which is cell division, and when and why and how that happens. So, in your book this week, this chapter sort of looks specifically at different reagents that have been isolated from plants to assist in various cures. And so, I wanted to this week highlight a group in Mexico that has been working with traditional curanderismo healers, which are essentially traditional folk healers um, in Mexico, and looking at the plants that they use for specific remedies and seeing if there are specific proteins or specific properties that can be used can be used and isolated to create new medicines. And one plant of particular interest is called Mexican bay leaf. And this Mexican bay leaf is used by traditional folk healers in the application of depression and other sort of sadness related ailments. And interestingly, the researchers in Mexico have actually been able to isolate beta pinene and linalool as active components that do in fact have activation in mice and show that they can be used to sort of help with depression in mice. So it's a promising agent, and we should never forget that a lot of the primary sources of our medicines, as we've learned from previous modules, really do come from what already exists on Earth. And one way that we could potentially make use of traditional healers is to really use that ancestral knowledge and propel it into more general use and really isolating the specific properties that might be medicinal to the plant. So the driving questions that we're going to be going through for this lecture is really understanding when and how does normal cell division occur in the body. So we're going to be looking at the processes, and we're also going to be answering when do these processes take place? What triggers a cellular division event? And we're going to specifically sort of be looking at this through the lens of cancer. And we're going to be understanding how normal cells and cancer cells differ with respect to cell division. And we're going to talk a little bit about this. Again, this is something that's more highlighted in your book, is understanding how cancer decisions can be made for a given patient. And then lastly, and this is what I was sort of highlighting with that original slide and research group, is understanding how new cancer drugs are developed. And we're going to be specifically looking at the drug Taxol and and the story of its isolation from an original plant source. So first, we want to understand exactly what is cancer in terms of biology. You're probably used to understanding cancer as just a multifaceted disease, such as lung cancer, breast cancer, or these very specific diseases. But in biology, the way that we think about cancer is a disease of unregulated cell division. Basically, it's basically a process in which cells divide inappropriately, or sometimes cells just divide and propagate in incorrect places. And in some instances, this can create a tumor. And in terms of treatment, there's really we're starting to get more and more options for treatment, but really the broad branches that exist for cancer treatment right now include surgery and then administration of different chemicals or chemotherapy that is going to essentially, hopefully, target quickly dividing cells, such as cancer cells, and therefore cease tumor development. So in your book, we cover this really interesting drug called Taxol, which is still very much used today in the treatment of breast cancer in particular. And it's a highly effective chemotherapy agent. And it was originally extracted from this specific yew tree and was examined for its properties. And this yew tree can be found all up and down the Pacific Northwest in particular, and can be quite important to the habitat there as well, and which your book sort of covers. But really, we want to understand how cancer is related to cell division in this process of mitosis. And most chemotherapy drugs actually interfere specifically with this process with cell division. So we know that cell division is basically this process in which a cell is reproducing itself. And it can do that for lots of different reasons. It's important for normal growth, development, repair. And we're going to specifically look at each of these and how those cells work. So broadly, there are three main reasons why healthy cells divide. The first is basically development. So there's a reason that you aren't the same height or size you were at birth, and it's because your cells are dividing and growing. The next is cell replacement. So there are some cells that have sort of a finite lifespan. So cells in your bone marrow regularly divide to produce new healthy red blood cells. The cells, especially in your gut and liver, are cells that tend to regenerate quickly. And then lastly, one that you can watch occur with yourself is just wound healing. So when an injury sort of triggers cell division of damaged cells, the reason that it heals is because your cells are dividing and creating that sort of new skin. So let's look specifically at each of these processes. So the very first one is just embryonic development. So once we have a fertilized egg, you start to create daughter cells, and these cells are what start to accumulate and then divide into the trillions of different cells that make up the human body. So it's not just, I'm growing and therefore I'm getting larger, but it's actually from the very beginning, you're starting to get cells that are dividing and then are generating different types of cells, such as bone cells or liver cells, throughout your body. So it's a complex process that this sort of building of cells and material, but ultimately this is sort of what creates our mass. Again, the next one that's really important, and this is really important in maintenance of the body, is cell replacement. There are lots of cells that just have a very finite lifespan in our body, and one of them is sort of bone marrow. And bone marrow is regularly divided to create new healthy cells. Another important thing to note about cells in the bone marrow is these can be a type of stem cell that can then be used to regenerate different types of cells in the body. So a very important system in cell replacement here. Because only a few types of cells can really do this and do this regularly in the body. And then lastly is that process of wound healing. And this is really where an injury triggers a response in your skin cells to basically reform and regenerate new types of skin cells after an injury takes place. Now that's sort of just a very brief overview of a very complex process, really for each of these. But those are the main broad categories in which cells are actively undergoing cell division in your body at any given time. Okay, we will pick up here where we're going to be diving in more specifically into the actual process of cell division. Okay, see you soon.